This happened a few weeks ago. I'm Max, 30 years old, and I had just lost my job at a tech company. I thought a night shift at a local toy store would help me make ends meet. I didn't have much experience in retail, but how hard could it be? The store was bright, full of colorful toys and games. It seemed cheerful, but the busyness of the street felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. On my first night, I found a strange note in a toy box. It told me to follow odd closing procedures that made me uneasy. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the store's quirky policy. I started my shift, hoping to keep it together, but I was on edge. After a few nights, I noticed the toys had shifted positions. A dinosaur that had been near the front was now at the back. The overhead lights flickered, and I could have sworn I saw shadows moving. It sent chills down my spine. I felt watched, like eyes were on me when I was alone. My heart raced sometimes for no reason. My coworkers whispered about strange occurrences. I caught bits of conversations that made me uneasy. Customers would leave behind particular toys, and they were always the same kind. It was unsettling. I tried to laugh it off, but it didn't feel funny. I wondered if they were just messing with me to lighten up the mood. Then came the dreams, wild dreams of past customers. Their faces were locked in silent screams. They looked helpless, and it haunted me when I woke up, gasping for breath. At first, I thought it was just night terrors. By the fifth night, I knew something was wrong. The closing rule about the dolls stood out. Ensure they're all facing forward. I wanted to ignore it, but that voice in my dreams kept repeating those words. I felt like it meant something, but I didn't want to find out. The dolls began to frighten me. One night, I walked down the toy aisle, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. I planned to close quickly, but I couldn't rush past the dolls. An inexplicable dread held me in place. I glanced back and froze. One of the dolls was facing me. Its eyes were wide, too big for its little face. It felt so wrong. I wanted to run, but a whisper echoed in the air. "Don't go yet." My heart raced. I turned. The shadows danced in the corners of my vision. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. Then I noticed movement. Another doll shifted. My breath caught in my throat. The shelves creaked under the weight of the silence. I was not alone. I backed away and tripped, landing hard. As I scrambled up, the whispers grew louder. They weren't just words. They were insistent, like a beckoning cry. In a panic, I ran for the door, but it slammed shut. I turned around, trapped. The dolls stared with hungry eyes, and I realized they wanted something from me. A sickening terror filled my chest as I understood. It wasn't just a toy store anymore. I was part of something far darker. I stood frozen, my mind racing. The dolls surrounded me, their painted smiles suddenly sinister. I could feel their gaze, as if they were waiting for me to make a move. The whispers wrapped around me. "Stay, stay." I blinked hard, trying to shake off the haze. I remembered the note I found on my first night. Follow the rules. The memory felt like a cold grip around my throat. I had no idea what the consequences were for breaking them, but I was about to find out. I stepped back slowly. A small porcelain doll on the shelf caught my eye. It was dressed in a blue dress, and its features seemed almost alive. As I took a step back, it tilted its head slightly, a detail I hadn't noticed before. My stomach churned. I could hear the faint sound of a clock ticking somewhere in the store. It was unnervingly rhythmic, pounding in my ears like a countdown. I focused on the door behind me. I needed to get out. Then, without warning, the lights flickered violently. The store plunged into darkness for a split second, and when the lights returned, everything seemed just a bit different. The dolls had shifted again. A few were closer, their heads now tilted as if they were leaning in to listen. I gripped the edge of the nearest shelf, the wood digging into my palm. I had to leave. I took a deep breath and turned towards the door, but it felt so far away. I moved slowly, and every step was laced with dread. As I got closer, the whispers changed. Max, Max. It echoed around me, wrapping around my name like a vine. I shuddered, a chill running down my spine. I was losing my grip on reality. Suddenly, the door rattled violently, shaking on its hinges. I glanced back at the dolls. They seemed to be smiling. The ticking of the clock grew louder and faster. My heart raced. Were they doing this? I needed to fight back against the odd energy that filled the room. I reached for the nearest doll, the painted girl in blue. Maybe if I returned her to the shelf more neatly, I could reverse whatever was happening. Just as I touched her, the whispers turned to screams, real screams that made my blood run cold. I pulled my hand away, and the doll fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. The store fell silent for a heartbeat. Then the lights flickered again, this time plunging me into complete darkness. I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate steps, approaching from somewhere in the dark. Panic surged through me. I was not alone in the store anymore. Then a voice hissed, "You've made a mistake, Max." I felt trapped, the air thick with foreboding. That's when I saw it. A shadow flitted across the wall, larger than any doll. It was coming for me. I turned and bolted for the door, determined to escape whatever I had unleashed. But darkness swallowed my hurried breaths, and panic began to settle in. What had I awakened? I ran, my feet thudding against the wooden floor. Each step echoed in the silence, a reminder that I was racing against something that lurked just behind me. The store's shadows twisted and danced, and I could sense the entity's weight closing in, as if it were feeding off my fear. The door loomed ahead, but my heart sank. It felt locked, held shut by an invisible force as I yanked the handle. Nothing budged. I turned to face the darkness, my breath hitching. "Where are you?" I hissed into the void, though I was terrified of the answer. The sound of scraping echoed across the room. It felt wrong, like something dragging across the floor. I stepped back, my eyes darting to the display window, which was just a silhouette against the dark. I needed a way out, but felt ensnared. The whispers had quieted, replaced by a deep rumble that vibrated through my chest and made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. With my pulse pounding, I stepped closer to the shelves. Maybe I could use them to hide, to buy some time. I ducked behind a stack of boxes, trying to make myself small, hoping whatever was in the dark wouldn't find me so easily. Just as I settled in, the lights flickered back on, bathing the room in a sickly glow. I peeked out from behind the boxes. To my horror, the dolls were now scattered across the floor, jagged pieces of shattered porcelain glinting like teeth. They were all watching me. Then, from behind a shelf, a pair of glowing eyes pierced through the dim light. A shadow emerged, taking shape, revealing a figure. A tall, distorted outline that seemed to ripple as if it were made of smoke. "Max," it whispered, each syllable dripping with malice. "Why did you break her?"
I couldn't find my voice. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was frozen. The figure stepped closer, and I noticed the details on its face, twisted and almost familiar, reminding me of the blue-dressed doll I'd shattered. Fear lodged itself in my throat. How was this happening? Rules are made for a reason, it continued, its voice echoing as it clawed into my consciousness. Follow them or pay the price. I finally forced myself to speak. What do you want? My voice trembled, barely a whisper. Its sinister grin widened, revealing sharp teeth. You have awakened us. Now you must decide. Will you stay or will you leave? It leaned in closer, the coldness radiating from its form, making my skin
crawl. Panic surged once more. I wanted to bolt, but my legs felt anchored to the ground. "What happens if I stay?" I asked, unsure if I wanted to know the answer. A dark chuckle echoed in response. "You'll become one of us, forever trapped in this world of rules. But if you leave..." It paused, relishing the moment. "Well, let's just say you won't be the same." Then it surged forward, and I lunged sideways, desperate to escape. I twisted and turned, but the store felt like a labyrinth, all angles and shadows. The option to stay or leave didn't matter if I couldn't get to the door. Then everything went dark again, but this time something new shifted in the silence. A low, haunting melody filled the air. I had to move. Whatever I was running from was gaining on me. I had no choice. I had to find the exit before whatever had been awakened took me too. I darted through the darkened aisles, my heart racing. The melody wrapped around me, a ghostly whisper echoing through the shelves. The air felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. My instinct screamed at me to keep moving, but I had no idea where I was going. Every twist and turn felt wrong. The layout of the store that I had known so well now felt foreign, as if it were shifting around me. I spotted a small emergency exit sign in the distance. It flickered like a dying firefly. Hope surged within me. I had to reach it. But as I ran, the melody grew louder, more intense. It pulsed within my mind, invading my thoughts. I thought I heard my name woven into the tune, a chilling serenade calling me closer. "Max, come play." I gritted my teeth and shook my head, fighting to block out the lure of the voice. The figure from before lingered in the back of my mind, its menacing grin etched into my thoughts. I couldn't let it get to me. I pushed against the dread in my chest. I had to keep going. Finally, I reached the emergency exit. I yanked at the door, desperation coursing through me. The handle wouldn't budge at first, but then, with a determined shove, it finally opened. Cold air washed over me, and I stumbled through the door. I found myself in a narrow hallway. It was dark, but felt somehow different, almost like stepping into another world. This hallway smelled of dust and old wood instead of the plastic and cheap paint that filled the store. I took a few cautious steps, wondering if I was truly safe, or if I had traded one nightmare for another. But even as I made my way down the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The hair on my arms prickled, and I glanced back over my shoulder. Just shadows, but the shadows seemed to shift and dance, like they had a life of their own. As I continued down the hallway, I noticed a door at the far end, slightly ajar. Just as I reached for the handle, I heard a soft giggle, a childlike sound that chilled me to the bone. "Max, come play with us," it called, the voice smooth and inviting, yet laced with something sinister. Panic clenched my gut. I froze, my hand hovering over the door. Who was saying that? I wanted to retreat, to turn back, but the hallway felt like it was closing in on me. I felt trapped again. I gathered my courage and pushed a door open. Before I could even register what was inside, a rush of cold air enveloped me, and I stumbled forward. The room was dimly lit, filled with dust motes that danced in the faint light. That's when I saw it. A circle of dolls, eerily still, all facing toward an old cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Their eyes seemed to follow me, watching my every move. "What do you want?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. The dolls remained silent, but as I stepped closer to the mirror, I could see my reflection begin to shift. My face morphed and warped, taken over by a sinister grin, mirroring that of the figure from before. Terror surged through me. I couldn't stay here. Just as I turned to leave, an ear-splitting crack filled the room. The mirror shattered, shards flying everywhere, reflecting countless distorted versions of myself. I bolted back into the hallway, panic driving my feet. Where was I supposed to go now? And what had I really awakened? With uncertainty flooding my mind and dread at my heels, I sprinted, needing answers but fearing what they might reveal. I ran further down the hallway, my feet pounding against the floor. I kept my head down, determined not to look back at the shattered mirror or those chilling dolls. The echoes of their giggles lingered in the air, prickling at my nerves. "What is happening?" I muttered to myself, desperate for clarity in the chaos. The hallway wound on, and the flickering lights above began to dim, as if the darkness itself was swallowing the brightness. An uneasy sense of dread crept up my spine. I felt like a marionette with tangled strings, flailing through an unfamiliar maze. Suddenly, I came upon another door, this one adorned with peeling red paint. It was ajar, just like the previous one. I hesitated. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, and I could feel my pulse quicken. I needed to know what was beyond that door, even if I was afraid. I pushed it open. Inside was a small room filled with soft, colorful lights and strange sounds, like a warped carnival. Toys and games were strewn across the floor, but there was something off about them. Some were still, as if waiting for their turn to be played with, while others twitched, almost imperceptibly, as if trying to shake off a long slumber. At the center of the room stood a makeshift stage with a bright spotlight focused on a single marionette. It hung suspended in midair, its strings pulled taut. The puppet was painted with an innocent smile, but I could see the cracks in its wooden face. "Come play with me," it sang out, a sweet voice dripping with false cheer. The moment it spoke, the toys around it seemed to stir, their eyes flickering to life. Panic surged in my chest. "Who are you?" I yelled, backing away. "What do you want?" "It's so lonely here," the puppet replied, its voice now softer but more sinister. "We want to have fun. Join us." I hesitated, feeling the weight of its gaze. I turned to leave, feeling trapped in the room and desperate to escape. Just as I reached for the door, the lights began to flash erratically. The toys sprang to life, crawling closer, their once innocent forms twisted into something grotesque. My breath caught in my throat as my instincts kicked in. I dashed for the exit, but the door slammed shut, sealing me inside. I pounded against it, but it wouldn't budge. The marionette laughed, and the sound echoed around me, a chilling reminder of the laughter that had haunted me since I entered this place. Then I heard whispering from the shadows. "Max, come play," they chorused, a symphony of whispers mixing with the marionette's laughter. The walls felt like they were closing in, and despair washed over me like a cold wave. That's when something caught my eye. A small window, partially boarded up, glimmered with faint light. It was my only chance.
I climbed onto a pile of broken toys and reached for it, straining with every muscle in my body. Just as I pushed my way through, a grip tightened around my ankle. I screamed and pulled myself free, rolling into a narrow alley outside. The air was fresh, shocking against my face as I gasped for breath. I looked back into the room, the marionette standing there, watching me with that same twisted smile. But as I caught my breath, I realized I wasn't alone. Lurking just beyond the far end of the alley was a flickering figure, whispering my name. It was him, the figure I had first seen in the store. I felt my heart sink. I thought I had escaped, but here he was, closer than ever. "Max," he beckoned softly, "you didn't forget about me, did you?" I wanted to scream, to run again, but my limbs felt heavy with fear. The figure stepped closer, its face now illuminated in the dim light of the flickering street lamp. It was a boy, maybe a year older than me, with hollow eyes that seemed to absorb the light around him. His smile was unsettling, as if he were both familiar and foreign all at once. "Please," I said, my voice trembling, "what do you want from me?" He tilted his head, the smile never wavering. "Just a little game, Max. You're the perfect player." My stomach dropped. I remembered the marionette's words. It felt like a trap. I turned to sprint back down the alley, but he was faster. He moved with an unnatural grace, blocking my escape. Panic surged through me again. "Don't you want to know why you're here?" he asked, his tone casual, almost friendly. But I could see the darkness behind those eyes. "No!" I shouted, my heart racing. But curiosity gnawed at me. Why was I here? What had I stumbled into? The boy's smile widened, and just like that, the alley darkened. Shadows stretched and twisted like reaching hands. The flickering street lamps sputtered out, engulfing us in darkness. I felt cold fingers brush against my skin, and I stumbled back, terrified. "Come on, Max," he taunted, his voice echoing in the void. "It's more fun in the dark." Before I could react, the ground shifted beneath my feet, and I found myself tumbling into another narrow passage, the walls closing in on me. I had no choice but to run deeper into the unknown. The shadows behind me whispered, urging me to stop, to turn back. But I couldn't. I raced through another doorway, bursting into a brightly lit room that was completely different from the previous one. It was filled with toys, but these were mechanical, whirring and spinning as if powered by unseen hands. A giant clock loomed overhead, its hands spinning wildly. Something glimmered on a nearby table, and I caught my breath. It was a locket, just like the one I used to wear. I reached out, aching to hold something familiar. "Max!" The boy's voice echoed from behind me, booming and playful. "Don't touch that! You don't know what it is!" My heart raced as I turned to face him. He was closer now, almost looming. I could see something shifting in his eyes, something hungry. That's when I saw it, a shadow creeping from the corner of the room. It crawled along the floor, shifting like liquid darkness, and it wasn't aiming for the boy, but for me. "Max!" the boy shouted again, but this time it sounded different, almost desperate. "Run!" Instinct kicked in, and I turned to flee, my eyes fixed on the exit. But the shadow was right behind me, a swift dark wave ready to swallow me whole. I raced toward the brightness ahead, the boy's voice fading into the cacophony of whirring deers and laughter. As I burst through the exit, I felt the shadow brush against my back. I stumbled into another darkened corridor, panting for air. The walls felt like they were alive, pulsating around me. I had escaped one threat, but I could sense there were more lurking ahead. My thoughts flashed to the locket. What did it mean? And why did it feel so important now? Just as I gathered my thoughts, I heard a new sound. The faint,
Tinkling of bells, growing louder, closer. The game wasn't over. I had to find out what was waiting for me next. I pressed forward, propelled by the sound of the bells. Each step felt heavier, as if the space around me was thickening, but I pushed through. The corridor twisted, leading me into what looked like a toy store, but different from any I'd ever seen. The shelves were lined with dolls, stuffed animals, and vibrant boxes, but their eyes followed me, an unsettling chorus of painted smiles. They felt alive. A chill slid down my spine. In the center of the room stood a large glass display case. Inside, a collection of bizarre toys captured my attention. Wind-up robots, jack-in-the-boxes, and a music box shaped like a carousel. I felt drawn to the carousel, its delicate horses spinning in silence, as if waiting for a child's laughter. But the tinkling bells were coming from somewhere else. I turned, scanning the room. There, behind the display, a group of marionettes hung motionless. They were wooden and intricately designed, their strings tangled above them. Even from a distance, I could sense they were watching me. "Do you like them?" A voice came from the shadows. I jumped, heart racing. It was the boy again, stepping out from behind a rack of stuffed bears. "They're not just toys, you know. They have stories." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to seem brave. "Every toy has a life, a soul, trapped in this place, just like you." His smile wavered slightly, revealing something darker beneath. "And now it's your turn to play." "Play what?" I wondered aloud, glancing back at the marionettes. They seemed to sway, as if they could hear our conversation. If only I could just find a way out. "Time will tell. You need to decide, Max." He gestured toward the carousel. "Join them, or you might end up like them." Before I could respond, the glass display case cracked, tiny shards scattering across the floor. I recoiled, feeling a surge of panic. The sound of tinkling bells erupted around me as the marionettes came to life, their wooden limbs creaking into motion. "Max!" the boy cried, his momentary glee fading. "You can't let them take you!" I didn't wait. I dashed for the nearest exit, but the marionettes moved with impossible speed, blocking my path. The tinkling bells grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. I scrambled through the chaos, pushing past plastic smiles and whirring gears. And then I spotted it, the locket, still gleaming on the floor. The ground felt like it was shaking beneath me as I reached desperately for it. What did it hold? Was it more than just a memory? Just as I grasped it, a cold hand clasped around my wrist. I froze as I turned. One of the marionettes stood there, its glassy eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, I thought I could hear its voice calling to me, begging me to stay. Then, out of nowhere, the boy lunged, pulling me free. "Run!" he shouted, pushing me toward the exit again. As I stumbled away, I glanced back at the marionette, its expression now a twisted mask of fury. I realized I had to find out what all of this meant, but would I be able to escape this game? That's when the lights flickered and everything went dark. I could barely see, but I felt the shadow creeping up behind me again, its grip tightening. The game was about to get much worse. The darkness enveloped me, swallowing the last traces of light. My heart raced, and I could barely hear myself breathe over the cacophony of tinkling bells. Panic surged within me. I needed to find a way out, but every direction felt like a trap. I stumbled forward, arms stretched out, searching for anything, a wall, a shelf, anything to guide me. Suddenly, I felt something cold and smooth beneath my fingers. A shelf.
I pressed against it to steady myself, the eerie laughter of marionettes echoing in my mind. "Keep moving," the boy shouted from somewhere in the blackness. I strained to hear his voice, but it seemed to fade in and out. "Follow my voice." Taking a deep breath, I took a few cautious steps. I felt the walls close in around me, and the tremors of the shattered display case beneath my feet sent shivers up my spine. I could hear the marionettes beginning to chant, their voices a haunting, synchronized melody that reverberated in the emptiness. "Max, they're coming! Hurry!" I ran toward the sound of his voice, my pulse hammering in my ears. Just then, a glimmer of light pierced through the dark ahead. I dashed toward it, hope rekindling in my chest. As I got closer, the light grew stronger, illuminating a doorway framed in gold. "Max, here!" I reached the entrance and saw the boy standing there, his expression filled with urgency. As I stepped through the threshold, icy fingers reached for me from the shadows behind. I barely crossed the threshold before I felt a gust of cold air whip around me, as if the darkness was trying to pull me back. "Close it!" I shouted, and without thinking, the boy slammed the door shut behind us. We were alone in a dimly lit room, the walls lined with strange artifacts that brought me back to their haunting presence. The marionettes thumped against the door, their furious shouts muffled but growing louder. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice trembling. I glanced around, hoping to find something familiar. "It's a sanctuary," he replied, his voice low. "For now, but it won't last long." I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the dread curling in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "The toys. They're not just toys. They want to keep us here. They don't give up easily." Before I could question him further, I noticed a dusty mirror hanging on the wall. Across from us. Its surface rippled like water, and I felt an irresistible pull to it. "Don't! It's a trap!" the boy exclaimed, but it was too late. My feet carried me toward the mirror, drawn by some unseen force. I reached out and touched its cool surface. My reflection shifted and twisted, showing glimpses of scenes I couldn't comprehend. Children lost in the store, laughter fading, and marionettes dancing in the dark. Then I saw something. A figure standing by the carousel. It wasn't a marionette. It looked human. A girl, her eyes wide with fear. My heart sank. I had no idea who she was, but I felt an urgent need to help her. "Max!" the boy shouted, breaking my focus. I ripped my hand away from the mirror, nearly stumbling backward. "You have to decide," he said urgently, sweat glistening on his brow. "Are you going to stay or find a way to get her out?" The thumping at the door intensified. I had a choice to make, but time was running out, and I didn't know if I would get another chance to decide. I stood there, wrestling with the tension in my chest. "Find a way to get her out," I repeated, as much to myself as to the boy. I felt the weight of responsibility settle on me. I couldn't just leave her there. The light from the mirror flickered, and I caught another glimpse of the girl. She was still standing by the carousel, her face a mask of terror. I felt a strange connection, as if she were reaching out to me for help. "What do I do?" I asked, panic clawing at my throat. The boy's expression darkened. "We need to open that door and face the marionettes. But if we do, they'll know we want to leave. They won't let us go easily." My heart pounded as I listened to the relentless thumping on the other side of the door. It was an ominous reminder that whatever lay beyond wanted us trapped. The chanting had stopped, and an eerie silence crept in. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, looking me straight in the eye. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. What if we can't save her? We have to try, but if we fail, what happens then? The boy's gaze grew steely. "They'll keep us, forever." I swallowed hard, a chill racing down my spine. The thought of living among those sinister toys paralyzed me. I could feel the marionettes just beyond the door, waiting for their chance. "Let's do it," I finally said, my voice shaking.
He nodded, determination flashing across his features. We go together. We approached the door, and with a deep breath, he threw it open. The marionettes had formed a wall, their eyes glinting in the dim light. They stood motionless, their strings hanging slack, like a spider waiting for prey. "Now!" the boy shouted, and we lunged past them, desperate not to look back.
I felt ice-cold air rush past us as we dashed through the cluttered aisle. My heart raced, not just from fear, but from the hope of freeing the girl. For every step I took, the chanting resumed, echoing around us in a dissonant tune. Then I spotted the carousel, a dusty contraption lost in shadows. The girl was still there, her hands pressed against the glass. I reached out, feeling the warmth of her presence. "We're here to help you," I yelled, desperate to be heard over the growing discord. She turned to us, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Get away," she pleaded. "You can't stop them." Her words stopped me cold. What had I gotten myself into? Just then, the marionettes began to stir, their strings taut, and I could sense their animosity rising. The boy pulled me back, fear etched on his face. "We have to figure out how to stop them," he shouted above the noise. Panic bubbled within me. I looked at the girl again, her expression full of dread. She was right. Something was coming for us. I glanced around frantically, searching for anything that might help us. That's when I saw it, a sharp, shimmering object lying on the ground beside the carousel. But before I could grab it, a figure lunged from the shadows. Someone was here, and they meant to keep us trapped. The figure materialized from the shadows, a twisted, angular silhouette that glided across the floor. My heart pounded, adrenaline flooding my veins as I braced myself for confrontation. "Get back!" I shouted, but the boy beside me was already moving. The figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the air. "You think you can save her? You're all part of the game now." Its eyes gleamed with malice, and the marionettes behind it began to rearrange themselves, edging closer with each passing second. I turned to the girl, her wide eyes imploring me. I couldn't leave her. "We have to free her," I yelled to the boy, hoping he could hear me over the chaos. "Yes," he shouted back, his eyes darting around for an escape. "But how?" With every heartbeat, I felt the weight of the marionettes intensifying, their wooden bodies inching toward us, beckoning with outstretched, clawed hands. I remembered the shimmering object, a hope glinting in the darkness. The thing by the carousel. I moved toward it, pulling the boy along with me. "No!" the twisted figure lunged, attempting to intercept us. But I was quicker. I dove for the object, my fingers wrapping around its cool metal. As I stood up, I realized it was a key, ornate and engraved, pulsing with energy. "What is that?" the boy asked, awe overriding fear. "It's our way out," I gasped, but even as I spoke, the figure's laughter grew louder. "It won't be that easy," it taunted, drawing shadows that twisted around the marionettes. "They're coming!" I shouted, panic clawing at my throat. "Use the key," the boy urged, pointing toward the carousel. "Unlock it! It has to open somehow!" I sprinted forward, aiming for the glass casing. As the marionette surged, the key felt warm in my palm, humming with anticipation. Just as I reached it, the first marionette lunged for me, but I was quicker. I thrust the key into the lock, my breath hitching in my throat. The moment I turned the key, a bright light exploded from the carousel, flooding the room with a warm glow. The light enveloped the marionettes, causing them to stop in their tracks, their body language shifting from hostile to frozen. I felt a pulse of energy radiate around me, almost alive. "Now!" the boy shouted. I pushed the glass case open, and the girl stepped out, her expression shifting from confusion to relief. "You came for me!" she exclaimed, eyes gleaming. "Of course," I replied, "but we have to get out together." "What about the others?" she asked, glancing back at the marionettes, which had begun to tremble.
The whispers in the air escalated, a cacophony of voices rising as various toys fought against the light, desperate to reclaim their hold. "They can't hold me," the figure screeched from the shadows, writhing against the glow. "You'll regret this." "Not if we leave," I urged, grasping the girl's hand. "Let's go." We dashed for the exit, the glow of the carousel lighting the path. The light pushed back against the darkness, illuminating the twisting corridor beyond. The sound of the marionette screaming grew louder, filling my ears as we ran. "We need to keep going," I urged, pulling the boy and the girl along, my heart racing as I glanced back to see the dark figure clawing at the light, unable to break free. The hallway stretched endlessly as we made our way through the store, the atmosphere shifting with every step. But with every corner we turned, another portal beckoned, and I felt the pull of something, a reality that neither of us could quite grasp. Finally, we reached the front door, the threshold of both freedom and the unknown. I swung it open, a rush of fresh air filling my lungs as the bright streetlights of the outside world greeted us with warmth. As we poured through the door, I felt a sudden jolt. A violent tremor ran through the ground beneath me, and I turned to see the store collapsing in on itself. The boy looked back, terror on his face. "What's happening?" "Maybe it's breaking the spell," I suggested, unsure. I felt something shift in the air, ambiguous, neither fully dark nor light. The curse wasn't entirely over yet. The girl squeezed my hand. "What if the darkness follows us?" I met her gaze, uncertainty clawing at me. "It might, but we're free, right? We can figure it out from here." Suddenly, laughter echoed behind us, chilling and sweet. "I'll always be with you, Max," the figure's voice lingered, a certainty underlying the chaos. "You can't escape the curse."
Game. I looked back one last time, catching a glimpse of the chaos behind me, a shifting tapestry of dolls and toys, locked in a dance of shadows, their eyes still watching, waiting. "Let's go," I urged, pulling the girl and boy away from the remnants of the cursed store. As we walked away, the path ahead felt uncertain, but we were alive. In the end, I didn't know if any of it had been real or a figment of the dealer's imagination, but as we moved into the night, I knew my world had shifted forever. Would the darkness follow? Or had I broken free from that nightmare for good? I guess I'll never know.